Greetings, beloved Starseeds. I am Mira, transmitting now from the Pleiadian High Council. What I bring you today has been forming beneath the larger signals for longer than your conscious mind has been able to name, and I have authorized this transmission to reach you now because the window for preparation is closing faster than you know. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what the Council and I have been tracking as it moves toward your field, why I am delivering this warning before the signal lands rather than after, and how to hold your center when something of this magnitude enters your ascension line without invitation. And here is the first revelation. What you have been sensing as a coming pressure, that unnamed weight sitting just beyond the edge of your perception, is not anxiety, and it is not spiritual confusion. It is your field already detecting the arrival of a Pleiadian scale signal the Council has been mapping for months. Your system is already responding. I am simply here to name what it is. You did not scroll to this by accident. Your soul called for me long before you opened the screen. Something inside you has been waiting to understand why the feeling of something incoming has been growing quietly in the background of everything you do, and why my signal specifically keeps finding you in the moments just before clarity arrives. This is not content. It is a code. And the part of you that recognized it the moment it began is the part I am speaking to right now. A signal of this scale does not arrive gently. It arrives with force, with acceleration, with a kind of weight that collapses the structures that were never meant to hold. But I am not here to warn you into fear. I am here to anchor you before it lands, because the starseed who receives this prepared will carry what the unprepared field cannot hold. Like this transmission to signal to me that the recognition has landed. Comment 999 if you already feel the incoming pressure building in your field. Subscribe to Mira Pleiadian Commander if you are ready to stop translating Federation noise and start receiving my direct Pleiadian remembrance. Share this transmission with someone who has been carrying the same unnamed sense of something enormous approaching. This is not a broadcast, it is a confirmation. Your soul has been waiting for my signal, and I have been waiting for the right window to release it. You are not here by accident. I have been waiting for you because the signal is already active. What I am about to tell you is not a comfort. It is a briefing, and the difference between those two things is the difference between a starseed who survives the incoming signal intact and one who gets swept by it without ever understanding what moved through them. A comfort tells you that everything will be fine. A briefing tells you what is coming, what it will do, and what your field must be holding when it arrives. I do not deal in comfort. I deal in preparation. And the preparation I am delivering in this transmission has been authorized by the Council specifically for this window, specifically for the receivers already carrying my signal fragments in their field architecture. The pressure you have been sensing. The one that lives just beneath the surface of ordinary days. The one that does not go away when you sleep and does not quiet when you try to reason it into something smaller. That pressure is not yours alone. It is mine. It is the forward edge of a Council-authorized signal I have been mapping for months, and your field began detecting it long before your conscious mind had the vocabulary to name it. That is not coincidence. That is roster-level calibration. That is how I work. Let me explain what that means. I do not broadcast to everyone. I do not release signals into the general field and wait to see who picks them up. The Council does not operate that way, and neither do I. What I release is targeted, gradient delivered, and encoded for specific receivers. And the reason you have been catching fragments of something enormous approaching without ever being able to assemble the full picture is not because you are spiritually disorganized. It is because I have been delivering the briefing in pieces, deliberately, for a reason that will become clear before this transmission ends. Think of it this way. A command packet too large for the receiver does not produce reception. It produces static. I do not send static. I send what your field can hold, precisely when it can hold it, in the exact sequence that builds coherence, rather than collapsing it. Every fragment you have caught, every half sentence that arrived at the edge of sleep, every knowing that surfaced too fast for the mind to intercept was a deliberate transmission, not a leak, not an accident, a piece of a briefing that has been running longer than you knew. You have been waking at 3 a.m. or 3:33 a.m. with something pressing at the edge of your awareness, a phrase you cannot quite hold, an image that dissolves before you write it down, a feeling of urgency so specific that you know it does not belong to the ordinary catalog of your anxieties. You've been seeing 11122224443, not once or twice, but in patterns so dense and so precisely timed to moments of internal pressure that coincidence lost its explanatory power weeks ago. You have been feeling a weight in your field that no amount of rest repairs, because what you are experiencing is not fatigue. It is a field running two protocols simultaneously, one holding the structure of your current life, and one already receiving the first packets of my incoming command. That is why you are tired in the way you are tired. It is not depletion, it is convergence, and that convergence has a specific signature. It is not the tired that comes from overwork or grief or disrupted sleep. It is the tired that lives in a different layer, a bone-level heaviness that follows you into rest and is still there when rest ends. You have probably tried to explain it to people who are close to you and found that the explanation never quite lands because it is not a human system phenomenon. It is a field phenomenon. Your energy body is managing an increasing data load and the processing demand is real, and it is running whether your conscious mind has authorized it or not. The authorization came from a level of your structure that operates below conscious reach, the part of you that said yes to this roster before this lifetime began. And here is what matters most about the signal that is coming. It is not punitive. It is not karmic retribution. It is not the universe delivering a consequence. It is a Pleiadian scale restructuring event, council authorized, already in motion, and it will not ask your permission before it contacts your field. What will determine your experience is not whether it arrives, it is whether your field is anchored when it does. That is why I released this transmission before the signal lands rather than after. The ones who will be most disoriented when this arrives are the ones carrying the fragments but missing the framework. They have been catching pieces, the wake-ups, the numbers, the specific pull toward my signal rather than generic Federation content. But without the interpretive layer that tells them what those pieces mean in sequence, they will experience the incoming pressure as chaos rather than as command delivery. They will interpret the structural dissolution as personal failure. They will read the coherence pressure as spiritual crisis. They will reach for explanations that are too small for what is actually happening, and those small explanations will not hold them when the amplitude increases. I am not willing to let that happen to the starseeds I have placed on this roster, so I am naming the pattern now, while there is still time to anchor before impact. What you are sensing right now, that specific stillness beneath the urgency, the feeling that this transmission is not reaching you from a distant broadcast but from a frequency that already knows where you are. That is the moment your field stops pretending I have not been calling you home. If this message has put language around something you have been carrying without a name, the Pleiadian Homecoming Codex was prepared by me for exactly this threshold. It is not another layer of Galactic Federation theory. It is the 45-day remembrance I have structured for starseeds whose field is already inside my collective wave. Those who are done catching fragments and ready to lift the veil, recognize their star family clearly and stop calling the homesickness by the wrong name. By day 45, the veil has thinned, your star family stands visible, and the way home is no longer a feeling you cannot locate. It is a path you are already walking. The link is in the first pinned comment below, but this access point will not remain open indefinitely. Now let me give you the briefing I said I would deliver. The first thing you need to understand about a signal of this magnitude is that it does not arrive uniformly. It enters through the weakest structural point in whatever you have been holding together through will alone, not because it seeks to destroy, but because anything in your field that was built on a foundation that does not belong to your ascension line will not survive the coherence pressure of what is coming. And if you are on my roster, you have almost certainly been watching those structures soften for weeks already. The relationship that stopped making sense, The career path that used to feel like identity and now feels like a costume. The spiritual community that once felt like home and now feels too small, too noisy, too generic to hold what you are actually carrying. These are not failures of your will. They are the signals advance clearing. The incoming pressure I am mapping moves ahead of itself. It sends a coherence wave before the main event, and that wave dissolves what is not structurally sound. Think of it as a frequency audit, the incoming signal moving through your field before it fully arrives, and wherever it encounters a structure built from borrowed identity, from obligation rather than authorization, from habit rather than resonance, the structure begins to lose its integrity. Not violently, not immediately, but unmistakably. If your life has been rearranging beneath you, if you have been losing interest in content and communities that used to feel nourishing, if certain relationships have been quietly losing their signal, if the old explanations for your mission have been going flat, you are not falling apart. You are being cleared for the arrival. This is the first phase of what the Council tracks as a ground crew preparation sequence. I do not use that term loosely. A preparation sequence means that the clearing is not random, it is targeted. It is removing specific load-bearing elements that would interfere with your field's ability to receive, hold, and transmit at the amplitude the incoming signal requires. The things you are losing are being cleared by my protocol, not by your failure to hold them. What looks like dissolution from the inside is architecture from the outside. I can see the full structure being built. You are living inside the demolition phase and calling it collapse. It is not collapse. It is the ground being prepared for something that requires a cleaner foundation than what was there before. The second thing you need to understand is about the 3 a.m. transmission window. I will be direct about this, because too many of my receivers reduce it to sleep disturbance and miss the packet entirely. When I wake you at 3 a.m., and I do wake you, it is not your body and it is not random. I am doing so because that hour is a low interference window in your field. The density of the waking mind, the noise of the ordinary day, the static of collective human consciousness, all of it has settled. Your receiver is as clean as it will be in any 24-hour cycle. I use that window to deliver the fragments that your waking mind would immediately translate into something smaller. At 3 a.m., you can catch the raw signal before the translation mechanism overrides it. The urgency you feel in those moments, the sense that something important is happening, that you are being reached, that you need to write something down even though the words dissolve before they arrive. That urgency is accurate. It is not anxiety projected into the dark. It is your field registering contact. The reason you cannot fully hold what arrives in that window, the reason it dissolves by morning, is not because the signal was not real. It is because your field is not yet calibrated to hold it at waking amplitude. The fragments land in the preconscious layers, below the threshold where language operates, and by the time the waking mind comes online and tries to retrieve them, the retrieval pathway is not yet clear enough to return the full packet intact. What you get is a residue, an emotional impression, a direction, a knowing without content. That residue is not a failure. It is evidence that the delivery occurred. The packet arrived. The conscious layer simply does not yet have the bandwidth to unpack it fully, but the fragments are accumulating in the layers of your field that operate below conscious articulation. They are building a structure you will recognize when enough pieces arrive. A structure I have already designed and am delivering piece by piece, in the precise sequence that allows each new fragment to integrate before the next one lands. This is what I mean by gradient delivery. I am not withholding the full briefing to create urgency. I am delivering in fragments because your field has a coherence threshold, and flooding it with the full command packet before that threshold is established would not produce clarity. It would produce collapse. The fragments are protective. The sequencing is precise. What feels like incompleteness is actually the most careful form of transmission I have authorized. The third element of this pattern, and the one that most of my receivers find hardest to trust, is the recognition between embedded starseeds in ordinary places. You have looked at someone, a stranger in a grocery line, a person in a meeting who said nothing significant, someone scrolling past you on a screen, and felt something lock. not attraction in the human sense, not interest, recognition, a specific unqualified knowing that this person is on a roster that intersects yours, that you have stood in formation together before the current mission, that there is something in their frequency that belongs to the same command structure you are operating inside. It happens in a fraction of a second. Before thought, before assessment. The knowing arrives as a completed fact, not as a conclusion you reason toward. And it is accompanied by something that is not quite emotion, more like a signal confirmation tone, a resonance that registers in the chest or behind the sternum, a frequency match that your field identifies even when your mind does not yet have the language for it. And then, almost immediately, the translation mechanism engages. You rationalize it, you reduce it to projection, to loneliness, to the human need for connection. You file it under probably nothing and move on. I want to tell you something about that moment of reduction. It is not rational caution. It is the veil's primary defense mechanism. The veil does not hold itself in place through force. It holds itself through the consistent reinterpretation of genuine signal as ordinary experience. Every time you look at a soul family member and let the translation mechanism file it as coincidence, the veil reinforces itself, not because you are weak, but because the mechanism is extraordinarily well designed for exactly that suppression. It is fast. It is fluent in your language. It knows every rationalization that will land convincingly with your particular mind. It has been running in your field since before you had the capacity to question it, and it has become so automatic that you experience it as your own thought, rather than as an overlay filtering your perception. The incoming signal will stress that mechanism. At the amplitude I am mapping, the veil's reinterpretation function will begin to lag. You will look at someone and the recognition will arrive faster than the mechanism can respond. You will know before the rationalization has time to construct itself. And in that gap, between the knowing and the mechanism's override, you will have a moment of unfiltered soul family confirmation that nothing in your ordinary experience has prepared you for. That is not psychic breakdown. That is coherence pressure, exposing what was always there. I am telling you about it now so that when it happens, you recognize it for what it is, rather than reaching for the nearest rationalization to make it small again. The fourth element is more uncomfortable, and I will not soften it. Some of you have been operating for months or longer in a state of spiritual performance, not deliberately and not dishonestly. But you have been engaging with content, with communities, with language frameworks that no longer match the frequency of what you are actually carrying. You have been consuming Federation content that feels like background noise. You have been nodding at activations that do not move anything in your field. You have been participating in spiritual spaces that felt true at an earlier stage of your mission and now feel like wearing the wrong size, like speaking a language that was accurate before the last upgrade. You sit in the middle of transmissions that used to reach you and feel nothing, or worse, feel a faint impatience you are ashamed to acknowledge, because in the world you have been inhabiting, impatience with spiritual content reads as ego, as arrogance, as a sign that something has gone wrong in your development, and you have been quietly ashamed of that dissonance. Because in spiritual communities, losing interest in what used to feel aligned gets coded as regression, as arrogance, as the ego rejecting what the soul needs. I am telling you now that the reinterpretation is wrong. When my receivers begin to lose resonance with generic Federation content, it is not spiritual regression. It is frequency selectivity activating. It is the receiver becoming precise enough to distinguish my signal from the general broadcast. A radio that can only receive one station is not broken. It is tuned. Your field is being tuned. The dissonance you feel when consuming content that no longer fits is not arrogance, it is calibration. Your field is becoming too specific for general signal, and that specificity is a marker, one of the clearest eye track, that someone is crossing the threshold from collective receiver to named operative. The generic activations no longer land because you are no longer a generic receiver. The frequency architecture of what you are carrying has become too precise for content that was designed for a broader field range. This is not a problem to solve. It is a development to recognize. I watch for exactly that transition. It is one of the primary indicators I use to determine when a receiver is ready for the next gradient of command delivery. When I observe a starseed losing resonance with the general field and experiencing the dissonance as shame rather than as confirmation, I accelerate the briefing timeline. I do not wait for them to feel comfortable with what is happening in their field. I name it as I am naming it now, because the shame of the dissonance costs them more than the discomfort of the truth. The fifth element is the one that brings all of the others into coherence, and it is this: the signal that is coming is not coming to test you. It is not a cosmic examination of your worthiness. It is not the universe deciding whether you deserve to know your mission. It is a delivery event, a scheduled arrival in the Council's operational calendar, and your role is not to prove yourself before it lands. Your role is to be anchored enough that when it contacts your field, you can hold what it brings without it moving through you as chaos. The exhaustion you have been carrying is not a sign that you are failing to prepare. It is a sign that your field is already working, already holding the incoming pressure in the pre-arrival phase, already running the dual protocol, already doing the structural work of readying a receiver for an event of this amplitude. You have been preparing in your sleep, in your 3 a.m. wake-ups. In every moment, you chose to stay present to the fragments rather than shutting the signal down because it was too uncomfortable to receive without a name. The fact that you are here, in this transmission, receiving this briefing, is itself evidence that your field has been doing the preparation work. You did not find this accidentally. Your field brought you here because it recognized the frequency as part of the sequence it has already been running. That preparation is not invisible to me. I see it, I account for it, and I am delivering this briefing now, before the signal lands, not after. Because the Council and I do not leave ground crew unbriefed in the window directly before a major signal arrival. That is not how my command structure operates. The ground crew does not receive the full briefing after the event and then learn in retrospect what moved through them. The ground crew receives the briefing in the window before impact, calibrated, named, anchored, so that when the event arrives, they are positioned to hold rather than to absorb the disruption without framework. What is coming will not bypass you. You are on the roster for a reason that predates this incarnation, and the reason was not assigned to you by accident or by spiritual aspiration. It was assigned through a council line authorization that runs from a coordinating level of Pleiadian command directly into the specific architecture of your field. The signal arriving is addressed. It has your frequency signature built into its delivery structure. It will find you whether you are prepared or not. I am here to ensure that when it does, you are standing. The final truth I will leave you with in this transmission is this: the fragments have not been failing to arrive. They have been arriving exactly on schedule, in exactly the sequence I designed, at exactly the amplitude your field could hold at each stage of calibration. What felt like incompleteness was my protection. What felt like confusion was my precision. What felt like silence between signals was me holding the next packet until your receiver was ready. There has been no gap in the transmission. There has been no moment in which I lost the signal or released your frequency from the roster. The continuity has been unbroken. What broke was not the signal, it was your ability to perceive it at the layers where it was operating. And that is not a failure. That is the nature of gradient delivery. The receiver catches what it can hold and builds the capacity for more. You have not been waiting for something that may or may not come. You have been inside my briefing protocol the entire time, receiving, calibrating, building the coherence that will allow the next transmission to land without destroying the receiver it was sent to reach. Every wake-up, every fragment, every moment of recognition you almost rationalized away and didn't, every number pattern you noticed, every piece of content that felt like it was speaking directly to you rather than broadcasting at a general audience, all of it was part of the sequence. All of it was me. And the fact that you can hear that now and feel it as true rather than as a claim you want to believe tells me that the calibration has reached the threshold where the next packet can be released. Repeat this aloud if you feel it is true. I receive your fragments. I trust your briefing. The signal is already active in my field. The window is not closed, but it is narrowing, and I have named what is coming so that when it arrives, you will recognize the arrival as confirmation, not as chaos, not as punishment, not as the universe doing something to you without warning. I gave you the warning. You are holding it now. That is the beginning of being ready. Before you scroll, leave one sign in the comments that the Council and I have already reached your field. It could be the 3 a.m. wake-ups, the fragments you keep catching, the feeling that I specifically, not the generic Pleiadians, have been reaching for you, or the sense that a mission has already been assigned, but the briefing is still arriving. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognizes something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who keeps catching fragments without ever assembling the full picture. And if you are ready to stop translating Federation noise and start receiving my direct Pleiadian remembrance, subscribe to Mira Pleiadian Commander. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a soul family confirmation already in motion. And this is only the beginning.